Welcome to The People I Play With. This is the show where I interview, well, the people I play with. I'm your host, Jesse Bernico. Today's guest is Kyle Wolfe. How are you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing great. Just had a storm blow through, but it's sunny again, so it's been a nice day.
So, Kyle and I know each other through work. We're both video game developers, and recently we played a game of historical crime and corruption using the story engine rule set. But before we get into that, I want to talk about you as a player in general. I want you to tell me what you think your strong suit is as a player. Tell me, what does Kyle bring to the table?
Oh wow, okay. I think something I've always enjoyed is I don't want to say foil, but I like being that character in a group that almost facilitates role play by reading into people, reading their motivations, and then using that to poke that stick a little bit, and then just using that to help get people talking, like doing watches at night or bugging somebody about something that happened earlier that day. I just like being that facilitator of role play because I think it's fun to put people on the spot, get their character thinking about something that they may not have been thinking about, because I think it gets a lot of content.
And you're talking about like among the player characters.
Yes. Yeah. In game with the characters amongst the group. I pretty much play exclusively online. Most people don't have their camera on, or we're just hearing voices. So it can be a lot of just waiting for the DM to say the next thing. And I like to help out because I can tell when a DM is sort of like, gosh, I need some breathing room. And it's like, hey, let's have a good RP break where we just chat amongst ourselves, and it's just a fun way, I think, to change up the normal flow of a session.
Interesting. I asked this question in a lot of interviews, and you start to see patterns emerging, and that's a new one. Group conversationalist is a new answer to that one. Do you think that there's anything that you could improve as a player?
So I know a lot of times I am not always the most attentive. Being in an online environment, it's really easy to have another browser tab up, to be looking something up or doing something in parallel. And then you get that moment of exposition, some plot twist has occurred, and you missed it because I glanced away for 2 minutes, and then I come back and now suddenly all hell has broken loose. And so I think for me, yeah, just generally being more attentive and in tuned to what's happening at any given moment.
I've even had that experience when I'm GMing where a player will say something which will prompt a thought, and now I'm processing this vague suggestion, and then the players are still talking among themselves, and I realize I have no idea if they just committed to any course of action or made any concrete decisions because I was busy processing.
When parties are talking to each other, I think that helps free up that mental load on a DM because, yeah, they're thinking about all kinds of other things. It can be hard to then also have to be role playing a character or multiple characters in an ongoing conversation, and especially with how intermingled out of character talk versus in character talk and just the back and forth context. Not everybody can be 100% tuned in all of the time.
Well, in this game, there was certainly a lot going on to be paying attention to. I had pulled some stuff from historical Avignon in France, specifically that it was an important river port. It was run by an anti pope. There were these three Italian merchant princes in charge of commerce. And there was a French duke across the river just itching to annex the city. And from that, you gave us Fernand, this man of many aliases and dubious social allegiances. So I want to ask you, like, what inspired that character in particular?
I don't know if you played Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, but in that game, one of the core mechanics is that you acquire these disguises, and one of them happened to be a priest's garb for when you're in the Vatican. Obviously, Indiana Jones is there doing his thing, but then meanwhile, he's dressed as whatever and just trying to remain inconspicuous. So I think that must have just been in my head as an idea, but it also just seemed like a fun way to target that realm of he's kind of a bad person, or at least he's involved in the underworld. I think that level of chameleon aspect just seemed fun, like different voices, different backstories, and to use one of my affinities that I came up with. Just making it up as I go along was just very fun. I don't think there was a specific thing, but if I had to compare it, I think that's what it would be.
Is this a common character for you to play?
To be honest, no. I think I'm more of that. I keep the party going as much as possible. I don't normally play a face character. It's pretty rare for me. I guess not necessarily the charismatic one, but just the one that's doing a lot of the talking and also generally being a not good person. I usually play more good characters. It was an interesting moment when I thought criminal, complicated faction elements in a city. I just zeroed in on he would be playing as many sides as he could to be getting advantages, turning people against each other, just taking advantage of a chaotic but organized city. So, yeah, pretty rare, but it locked in pretty quickly in my head.
I'm curious, story engine, you just have these four attributes, but then you fill up those attributes by just writing whatever terms or phrases that describe those things. Because you were now confronted with a more blank page, did that open up possibilities to you, or did you find yourself at sea?
It felt very open, very unrestrictive. You could start picturing the character working a very specific kind of way, and then it was more grafting that into those short phrases for descriptors. Then, when you're learning this descriptor, here's what I want it to mean in this moment. It's a very basic framework that then gives you a lot of flexibility with how it works and what what it means. It's like these can be social descriptors, these can be mechanical descriptors. This is like how he approaches combat, which in my case is not at all, or throwing a distraction as much as possible. I think it works really well. I think when you sent us the rules list, it was like a page. It's really nice to just have a page of rules that you can absorb and then put into action, and it just works.
I know that people, like, when I ask them questions about, like, do you like to play a type, right? They're like, oh, I typically like to play healers, and they'll look to the mechanics because usually somewhere there's a way to sort of just, oh, be the healer. But here it's like this blank page of like you can be anything. So I was wondering, since you did mention usually playing a support character, if the ability to now do anything really open that up for you as opposed to being able to just hone in on the pieces of the game that are sort of comfortable and familiar.
I think that is specifically with my group of friends. I just end up filling that support role. But in this case, I feel I was less targeting a role and more of just here's the character I have in mind. Here's how I think they would do this thing. And then the gameplay following on from that is just how would I make use of this thing in this moment? You're thinking about what the character would do rather than just, oh, I go into a rage and I attack the nearest thing to me. It doesn't seem as though the story engine itself has the concept of like roles. It is literally just you have characters and they are in this story doing things. Because combat is more of like we pool as many dice as we can on the other side, we roll it, we determine the result, and then we kind of yes and our way through the resolution of it. It's less of a turn by turn, I do this, I go do that. With story engine, it's almost like that improv style of how to resolve a situation. And it's easier to, I think, rely on the dice as a mechanism of like, okay, well, we didn't win, but we can flavor that how we'd like, or oh, we won. Let's flavor that in some kind of way. The dice you're rolling is more of, all right, here's how this goes. Let's figure out how we get from A to B, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, the term I tend to use for that is expressive. The system has produced an outcome, but now we have to make it real and concrete. And then you've got these descriptors that you used into the dice roll that then say, because, I threw this into the dice pool, this is part of what went down to make this outcome occur. So now I want to talk about Fernand's loyalties. He primarily interacted with two of the merchant princes, Peruzzi and Accioli, uh, a Tory who was an agent of the third merchant prince, Barty, and the two other player characters, Vioral and Elaine. Now, it felt very murky in a good way to me whether Fernand felt any loyalty or true camaraderie with any of these people, regardless of whether they were a PC or an NPC. So I'm curious, how did you perceive Fernand's personal relationships with like all of these people?
So it might sound cliche to be like, oh, they're all just chess pieces to him. It's not quite the vibe I'm going for. Fernand's a very empathetic person, but he just takes advantage of that empathy in other people to get what he wants. And so Vioral is clearly prime patsy material, very caring about everybody, trying to help. That's a very easy thing for a character like Fernand to turn in the right way of, hey, I need some help with this. You wouldn't want to let me down. Very easily manipulable. Elaine always felt almost akin to a gun to Fernand of, I just point him in the right direction at the right time and then let him go. My initial play was that we were going to kill the Pope the first night where we went to Accioli's and we brought the party out. I was hoping to get a big crowd of the Vice Squad to come out to the streets and leave the church ground very undefended and then have Elaine go. It didn't end up working. It started dying down before we could really get that momentum. But that was going to be, hey, he has motivation to do it. I just need to get him an opportunity and my hands are essentially clean. And that, I think, was always the key motivation of how can I get these people to do what I want in a way that makes it seem like it was their idea. I don't think anyone in the story outside of maybe the Duke's daughter really hit anything more than just, yes, I can use this person. And that's really all it came down to. So I think generally speaking, no friends, not really interested in anything beyond a sort of give and take relationship, and arguably mostly take.
The reason I included the PCs in that description of here's all the people that you sort of interacted with was that I felt like there was no difference. It didn't matter if they were a player character or an NPC. You were very very consistent in your treatment of them, but I also found that very, very opaque. Like at one point, I played Accioli as this very, flirty bisexual guy, and at one point he was kind of into you. And with Vioral, who was a PC, I couldn't quite tell if there was some sort of like student master mentorship type thing going on there or not. Were you just using them? I was just really intrigued, and I wanted to deal into like where Fernand was emotionally with these characters, because what I saw on the surface versus what I felt like might be going on under the surface seemed to not 100% line up. I don't think it was a problem. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that as it had progressed and developed through play.
Yeah, yeah. And to cap on that, I by the end of the story, it's like, oh great, we saved the city. And then I wanted to make a point of Fernand immediately taking advantage of the situation. Essentially, I put the city in this situation, but I'm also going to now take advantage of it as much as possible. I'm not going to just be like, oh, I did a good thing and now I can be happy with my life. It's like, nope, just it's a new state of affairs. I don't see it as anything more than just, hey, here's who I'm working with today. Here's what I'm trying to get out of them. Here's how they can help me do that. And then that's every day, basically. It's all a hustle to him, essentially. There are moments where I think you can maybe see him start to like maybe this is the right thing to do. But I think ultimately there was always that other side of it where, no, you can see very clearly that this is an obstacle he needs to remove because it stops him from doing this other thing. So that when we discover that it's a body in the chest, I was only opening it up because I thought, hey, maybe these are things I can steal or sell. And oh, it's a body. Okay, well now we got to deal with this body thing. So we get that across the river. I talked the party into doing that with heavy resistance from Elaine. We get across, we're burying it. Cool. We get discovered. Okay, we were forced to do this. We're innocents. It all just flowed really nicely. Here's how I use this in this moment to not get killed. And then now I have this piece of information, and tomorrow I will use that. But essentially, it is all just various resources that he can use, and that's how I viewed it.
It's very utilitarian, and in fact, that sort of leads into my next question. At the heart of this scenario was a pretty atrocious crime, because it turns out that the anti-pope was kidnapping, raping, and murdering teenage girls.
Yes.
And this came out relatively early in the play, especially since you were co-opted into smuggling one of the dead girls across the river, as you mentioned, and yet when we were playing, it didn't feel like justice or vengeance was a strong driving force behind really any of the characters. But again, your character was so utilitarian. I was wondering if you felt like Fernand had any particular sort of moral core, or was it all just desperate self-preservation from the minute you were sort of implicated?
The self-preservation was more against the Duke's perspective of things. Okay, we got caught smuggling a dead body across the river. I need to make this seem like we're not responsible, which obviously we weren't, but like we're not involved with the people that were. We were just doing a job. And then it became I need to make sure that the Duke doesn't come across the river yet, because at that point there were still three merchant princes in play. The anti-pope and his goons essentially still heavy power structure. I don't think we really knew much about the Duke beyond he's just itching for a reason to come across the river. I think it became I need to keep him from coming across the river. That had less to do with why these girls are being killed. So to answer the question more directly, he has a line. He doesn't do violence. He prefers not to. Not because he can't or he has some moral objection to it. It's more just like it's messy, and he's always just been better talking his way out of things or getting other people to do violence on his behalf as opposed to doing violence himself. And so I think he can recognize that in this case, hey, there's really no reason to be kidnapping these girls and killing them. Once I think he knew that it was the anti-pope, seeing himself as like this conflicted individual, and he's like, oh, I'm so tortured by my nature. The hypocrisy really hit him hard of like, come on, dude. I'm a bad guy, but I don't think I'm doing good. I'm doing what I want to get what I want. You're just hurting people. He just would never allow that. He would do what he could to prevent it from happening anymore, mostly because he sees ammo I can use to get this guy out of my hair because he's a problem for the city. It also comes down to from a base instinct of Fernand's to prefer freedom. And I think the anti-pope, the vice squad, is more of like, hey, we're going to control the city and make it be what we want it to be on behalf of this church that isn't actually the church. It's our own church. I can't get along with this. And then, hey, cool. You're also doing a terrible thing. That just gives me more reason to get in your way and get you caught. I think ultimately it was let's get the merchant princes turned against the pope because he's a bad guy, and resolve this internal to the city and not involve the duke. That changed after a certain point, but I think ultimately that was his initial play, was we need to take care of that first. And that goes back to why did Fernand come to this city? When did he get here? I now have something I can use to get this out of my way. Was his motivations. It happens to align with, yep, he's a bad person. He needs to be stopped. Like it was a factor, but now I can use it. It's a resource I can take advantage of, less so than, oh, I'm going to stop it merely because it's bad.
You brought up your character's relationship with violence more than once. I feel like there was a lot of things where violence might have occurred. You almost fomented a riot between Accioli's, party and the Vice Squad. Peruzzi just straight up assassinated Accioli in your presence. Colette then went to town on the anti-pope after Vioral took out the anti-pope.
We had Colette kill that other guard. So I was going to say, I think we even let the one go, but no, it was more of a, by all means, continue your rampage.
It's interesting that you say that, like, Fernand kind of had this line at violence, but he certainly had no problem either fomenting it or not stepping in to prevent it when it occurred in his presence.
Him getting involved puts his life at risk. Getting other people involved is just another tool in his toolkit. This person is perfectly happy to kill this person. Does that help me? Sure. Do I need this person alive? Yeah, okay, well then maybe I should try to stop it. I didn't really care if Accioli lived or died. This is just going to be a big enough distraction to maybe set off this powder keg in the city and maybe get Elaine that shot at an undefended anti-pope. So yeah, I think it's a very dispassionate view of it. It's not for him to be doing, but he doesn't have any qualms about letting it happen, especially when it helps him. And I think that's why fighting the Duke's guards to try and escape, that was never going to be the play. From his perspective, he's not a fighter. Even if Vioral was a fighter, I think Colette could 1v1 all of us. Even if all three of us attacked her, she could probably take us out single-handedly. Not to mention, there were people with crossbows and spearmen. We're across a river. There's no world in which we fight our way to the dock and then get across without being just speared by crossbows from the riverbank. We need to not have any kind of violence happen in this moment, because that's not how we're going to get out of this. I probably would have tried to stop a Tory being killed if I had been there, but I was elsewhere at the time, because as I recall, they found out what the Pope was up to, that a Tory on behalf of the Barty's house was assisting, and they killed him for it. Fernand would have definitely seen a Tory more as a resource. You can tell us where we need to go and what we need to know. And then I ended up using his identity to do exactly that later on. But I think in the moment, I would have tried to convince them to be like, no, we need to abscond with him to somewhere private and talk with him for a while. Then maybe we kill him. It may have still ended up that way, but I think in the moment, I would have tried to stop it.
Yeah, I think Fernand being in Peruzzi's dungeon at that moment was one of the key moments that the game sort of pivoted on, because then Ettori's body was discovered by the Vice Squad, which then led the Pope to panic, which led to Barty's assassination. It's funny that all this other violence you either fomented or just kind of stood by and let happen in front of you, but the one that you probably would have intervened in, you weren't actually present for.
I have to say that whole chain of events genuinely just wasn't expecting to be poisoned, so I just drank the wine and then boom, I'm unconscious. I wake up in the dungeon, there's a pregnant girl there. I thought for certain I was either in the church's dungeons or that Peruzzi was responsible, because I don't believe we knew at that point that it was the anti-pope. It was still a question mark of who was who. But then it was the whole thing where no, this girl was smuggled to me. Peruzzi is I compared that we were very similar characters, but I think he's maybe one step further down that sort of moral compass. He got a pardon out of it. Maybe he looks the other way and does some dirty work. It's funny how I don't think Fernand would ever have gotten to that point, mostly because he would not have killed anyone himself. I feel like Peruzzi's the slightly darker version of Fernand. Accioli, I think, is a little bit more untethered. He just was having a good time. R.I.P. Accioli. Whereas Fernand is always more business than anything else. In terms of the merchant princes, I don't think I even really encountered Barty. I think he was dead before I ever had a chance to talk with him.
Barty was assassinated before you had a chance to talk to him. He was the most straight shooting business of the three.
Okay. See that then I might have gotten along with him the best then out of all three of them.
I wanted to make them a little distinct from each other, so definitely Barty was the quote unquote normal one, whereas Peruzzi is more the weirder shadow schemer type, and then Accioli is just there to have a good time. I think it was interesting to see your character in comparison to the other political movers and shakers of the environment. So to ask sort of one more question about this whole, like, the moral angle of this whole game. Two of the merchant princes are dead. One is basically arrested. You guys kind of killed the anti pope yourself. The city is sort of has been annexed to France. The Duke came in, took over. This is mine now. Long live the king. In all of that, obviously the girl from Peruzzi's dungeon would have been found, discovered, released, all that stuff.
I think that would have been the one good thing that Fernand would have tried to do. Hey, you should check Peruzzi's dungeon. She'd been through enough. Let's let her out. Let's let her torment be done. And that probably would have been the only sort of good thing that Fernand did the entire time.
My overall question about all of that mess was, do you feel like any justice at all occurred here, or was it all just like, rearranging the tables on the Titanic?
I do kind of see it as rearranging the tables. I don't think we lived in a world in this setting that it's like sunshine and rainbows afterward. Everything's good now. Well, no, probably not. There's still probably going to be an underworld. There's still probably going to be crime. There's probably going to be a reprisal from Italy. The Duke is still a Duke, and he works for a king. Generally speaking, that's not ideal for not kings and not dukes throughout history. That's the general flow. I don't see that as and now an era of peace follows for Avignon. It's more just like, hey, these are the new bosses. I play that off for Fernanda. I come back 6 months later as I'm now somebody else, positioned higher in the French government to see what else I can squeeze out of this lemon. I don't think this is the first time he's lived through like a coup and just picked up his pieces afterward and continued playing. Like, it's just the quest for more money, I think. Maybe not money. I don't know. It's hard to say whether I was more motivated by money or status or just the love of the game itself. Like, it's just fun to be that manipulative character. I don't even want anything. I just want to mess with people and have them do things. Ultimately, I think it's status quo, or at least it will be in a few months' time. It'll be back to what it was. Just different people in charge.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, I think Fernand's epilogue definitely sort of spoke to that cycle of political darkness. So, do you have a question for me about all of this?
When you're setting up these these games, these stories, do you ever think about, oh, okay, so this is where the story has left off. If we were to say come back to these characters or at least this setting with this group or a different group, would you run the same scenario? Would you want to advance the timeline a little bit and maybe see that post France Avignon, or do we go to a different city somewhere else to tell a similar story or a different story? I guess in the context of what does a sequel look like to Avignon in Story Engine for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So if I were to play this game with a completely different group of people, um, I might just do this again. Just be like, see see what a different group of characters does with this more or less same situation. Because I've done that where I've sort of taken the same scenario. If it were us, if we're like you and Ural and if Elaine all wanted to do another story, it's interesting, especially because your character didn't necessarily move on. Right.
Mm.
I think I'd have a lot of discussion about where the players felt their characters were and whether they wanted to continue those characters. But if we're still centering Avignon, probably what I would do is I would jot down some notes about the Duke. I'm not a big lore person, do a ton of research thing, but I will do so. I mean, that's how I found this situation. Is that it's actually based on some real political stuff that happened actually about 300 years before the time period I was imagining. So I just brought it forward in time. So I'd probably look at some stuff like what was going on with the King of France at that time. I'd look a little bit at actual French history and see if anything sparks some ideas. You know, the Vatican used to theoretically assert control over this area that now this Duke is claiming is for France. So I'd probably come up with some new points of setting level tension, and then I would have to figure out how to make that concrete and real. The same thing happened here where I started with, oh, some interesting historical things. Then I thought of something really concrete. And, well, what if the Pope is an actual serial killer? Unlike the first time around where I had that idea kind of independent of who you guys were, and then I figured out how do you come to be exposed to that. I now have more context for who you are, so I think I could bring home whatever decision I made, like the Duke has decided to marry Colette off to somebody she doesn't really want to marry. Colette comes to you and says, Fernand, you got to get me out of here. You're the master of disguise.
Now that's something we have to deal with because the law says she's getting
Yeah.
married. She doesn't want to, and I need some help getting her out. I think that's fun. I think that'd be cool. So I'm not saying let's do that, but I think we got something.
There's lots of games in my collections where there's a very specific, and then this is what you do to get from adventure A to adventure B. Story Engine doesn't have that, so I think my go-to tools for just myself are any second session is going to speak way more specifically to who the PCs are because we've now played at least one chunk of something concrete. We've boiled them in real history. So any second session is going to be take much more directly into account where are you, what are you up to, who are you, how does the fallout of what happened in the last session manifest very directly and personally for you, like right now, right? Um, so just to begin to sort of wrap up this discussion a little bit, I like to ask people this fun question of: do you have a favorite recent game memory? Something that really hit you hard?
I am gonna pull one from this game because just genuinely, there was no world in which I imagined Peruzzi would be at Accioli's party that night. And so me bringing those papers, I was like, great, this is perfect. I'm going to turn Accioli against Peruzzi. That's going to get them all fighting each other. In no world did I predict that the Pope would reach out to Peruzzi and that Peruzzi would be there and that I basically just delivered him his get out of jail free card. It was just sort of a chain of events where I think Fernand in character just going, damn, like, yes. Like, I think it's a rare moment when Fernand can be that out of his depth of events that he just could not see coming. He thought he had Peruzzi in his pocket, or at least he was in Peruzzi's pocket. I don't know how you came up with that twist of like, here's what the anti-pope's going to do. Peruzzi's going to be the one to play ball. It was very fun to experience that because I was so flummoxed, and then I also got shot. So I'm looking at the wound, I'm imagining it in the shoulder, and he's walking out of the party like, how did I get here? How did this happen? Man, just didn't see it coming at all.
That's why I stopped the previous session and I needed to think about some things because there's this thing I like to do where I call it keeping myself honest and make sure I'm not cheating, where I want to actually sort of step through who knows what, When did they know it? You just given the Pope evidence that everybody knows what he's up to. He knows Peruzzi's onto him. He knows Peruzzi's the most politically ambitious. So rather than try to assassinate everybody, if he just uses his legal authority to extend Peruzzi's control of everything and then preemptively pardon him to assassinate Accioli, okay, now they're in accord. Peruzzi gets what he wants. Peruzzi's evil enough to go along with that. It didn't take me long. It was 30 minutes of quiet contemplation to get there, but I needed those 30 minutes, right? And then that's how that moment came to be. It was definitely a series of events that I very carefully thought, who does what when. Hell, I was gonna have Peruzzi try to hire Vioral as a propaganda machine, but that didn't work out. So my absolute last question for you is there a game or even a game concept that you've never gotten to play that you would really love to play?
So my D&D group that I play with, we had a break at a certain point because one of our players, he was an accountant, so he was just not going to be able to play for a few months while his office was doing tax things. But we had looked at a couple other systems to do one shots, maybe three shot, and the one we never actually got to do was Stars Without Number. And in that, I had kind of talked my DM into letting me play a sentient computer where I drive the ship, I take care of the crew, and I just liked the idea of that role play. I think that's one that I've been really sad that we've never really gone back to talk about.
I own Stars Without Number. It's that designer, Kevin Crawford. Stars Without Number. It was the very first thing he ever published, and I actually ran that version of Stars Without Number in the past. But he has since published a lot, so I own his rewrite of Stars Without Number. Well, thank you for being one of the people I play with
Yeah.
and chatting with me today. I think this went really well.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you once again for just putting together a great game.
Bree Seal, who you'll hear from later this season, played Vioral in this game. They composed an in-character poem to memorialize the dead girls. I present it for you recorded in their own voice.
I have seen an angel, and she laid still in a pine box, wings plucked clean and forcibly cast off. I have heard the whispers of men who know yet choose to not, trading in divine blood and leaving doves to rot. Now I speak the evil, the bitter sordid truth. The devil walks among us, no, above us in his rule. Innocence further innocence, he consumes, subsumes, and dooms.
Thank you for listening to The People I Play With.
Please join me in 2 weeks when I interview Jeff Jones about playing an ego warrior in Sorcerer.